CQDX, CQDX, CQDX. This is Havana calling. CQDX, CQDX, CQDX. This is Radio Havana calling all shortwave listeners and radio amateurs. Welcome to... DXers Unlimited, Radio Havana's weekly feature dedicated to the fascinating world of radio communications.
Hola, amigos radioaficionados all around the world. This is the middle of the week edition of DXers Unlimited, your favorite radio hobby program, reaching you when solar activity is certainly at very low levels. Just a single sunspot active region in sight, and the solar flux hovering around 73-75 units. This was Tuesday morning UTC. Poor high-frequency shortwave bands propagation conditions are expected during the next 3 days and maybe more to follow. I am Arnaldo Arnicoro, Radio Amateur CO2KK, your host here at this twice-weekly radio program that promotes amateur radio as a very nice way to spend your spare time, learn about electronics and radio communications, and also enjoy the thrill of participating from time to time in amateur radio contests. Here's now a news item, item 2. No more Radio Australia on the air on the shortwave bands, and the decision by the Australian broadcast executives continues to be questioned by users of the shortwave services that cover the Northern Territories and other faraway isolated areas of Australia, the Indian Ocean and the Pacific Ocean. Efforts to bring back on the air at least the transmissions aimed at the Northern Territories and the Pacific Ocean region have not achieved any results so far. Item 3, solid state. Totally solid-state shortwave broadcast transmitters that are able to put on the air more than 10 kilowatts are simply non-existent. Transmitters that are able to provide power outputs above 10 kilowatts are all equipped with vacuum tubes, power amplifier stages. And for all practical purposes, the replacement of any existing shortwave transmitter of power outputs above 10 or maybe 20 kilowatts requires the use of very high voltages switched mode power supplies to feed the final amplifier stages that use vacuum tubes, high-power vacuum tubes. Present-day high-power shortwave transmitters technologies use a complex modulation system known as pulse step modulation that completely eliminates the classic Class B vacuum tubes modulator stages. But let me add that the hybrid solid-state plus vacuum tubes power output stages using the pulse step modulation technology transmitters are much more complex than the classic ones still in service at many shortwave transmitter sites around the world, and of course in need of immediate replacement. Item 4. DXers Unlimited listeners write to info@rhc@enet.cu, our email, info@rhc@enet.cu, telling me about their experiments and findings when trying to build their own receivers. Amigo Julius from Hamburg, Germany, sent a very nice write-up of his 2 very simple shortwave radios using readily available parts. Julius has built one very simple yet effective and easy to duplicate solid-state regenerative receiver that tunes from 4 to 10 megahertz in 3 sub-bands, from 4 to 6, from 6 to 8, and from 8 to 10 megahertz. Good band spread. It uses a common type of field effect transistors for the detector stage and 3 audio transistors, very common ones. His second receiver is also a regenerative radio, but using vacuum tubes, also the more common types. He uses a 6C4 or EC92 triode and a triode pentode audio type 6B-M8 or ECL82 as the audio. Julius explained in his love letter filled with circuit diagrams and notes that the purpose of building the 2 radios was to compare their performance, something he sees as a possible contribution to clarify the long-standing discussion that has been going on for quite a long time related to the performance of solid-state versus vacuum tubes regenerative receivers. In my own personal opinion, a well-built vacuum tubes regenerative receiver will outperform any solid-state radio that I have ever been able to build. It may be hard to explain, but in actual practice, this is what's happening to me. More about the use of simple home-built shortwave radio receivers coming up after a short break for Station ID. I'm Arnicoro in sunny Havana, Cuba, enjoying beautiful spring-like weather here today, Tuesday morning, local time. Sí, amigos, yes, my friends, this is Radio Havana Cuba. The name of the show is DXers Unlimited, and here's now item 4. Two very important findings that show up when comparing solid-state versus vacuum tubes radios, show how well they are built from a mechanical point of view and what type of fully regulated and well-filtered power supply circuits are used. It's very dependent on the mechanical construction and the good power supply regulation. My prototype vacuum tubes regenerative receiver is built using a very rugged variable capacitor and ceramic coil form. It is built like it was going to be a variable frequency oscillator, a VFO, for transmitting from a mechanical and electrical point of view. Very rugged battle chip type construction. I followed the construction practices of the world famous ZL2JJ, Zulu Lima 2 Juliet Juliet, New Zealand regenerative receiver. That meaning extensive shielding of the detector stage and very well built mechanical construction. The power supply is on a separate chassis and it uses really large capacitors, filter capacitors, very large ones, and a 10 Henry filter choke. It falls short of a fully electronically regulated power supply, but it works very well. As regards to the supply to the vacuum tube filaments, I have built a solid-state regulated power supply providing 6.3 volts to the detector stage filament. Later, I realized that the regulated filament voltage supply was quite capable because of the current rating of feeding the audio tubes, so I connected the filaments of the audio tubes also. Results of my vacuum tubes receiver using the Hartley circuit with screen grid voltage regeneration control are truly amazing. The latest version uses the airspace variable capacitor and dial mechanism of a World War II heterodyne frequency meter type BC221, making possible very smooth fine-tuning. I have yet to finish the solid-state version using a dual-gate MOS FET device and also using another BC221 variable capacitor and dial assembly, so the performance of the vacuum tubes versus the solid-state radios can be effectively compared. In the meantime, I am grateful to amigo Julius for providing his very detailed comparison that finally ends up with the two text lines conclusion. He says, and I quote, "Arnie, in my opinion, the vacuum tube's regenerative detector performance is much better than the solid-state radio by all standards, especially because the smoothness of the screen grid variable voltage regeneration control cannot be achieved with the solid-state version so far." See, amigos, the long-standing controversy is coming to an end. Parts for building vacuum tubes regenerative detectors are still plentiful around the world, and those devices last a lifetime when operated at the low voltages required to make them operate efficiently. Just to give you an example, the latest version of my vacuum tubes receiver uses a plate voltage supply of 130 volts unregulated for the audio section and a 36 volts regulated voltage feed for the detector stage using a 6AK5 or Russian 6ZH1P pentode tube. I managed to regulate the 36 volts by using 3 series connected 12 volts Zener diodes that were available. And in another earlier radio, I used a higher voltage coming from a VR75 gas discharge regulator tube that works very well too. You can build your own regenerative receiver with coverage from the AM broadcast band up to around maybe 20 megahertz or so using commonly available parts and experimenting with the coils and capacitor combinations of the tune circuits. It is possible to achieve a very easy tuning band spread feature to cover segments of between 200 and 500 kilohertz. For example, one of my radios covers the 40 meters band, first 200 kilohertz with a very easy to use band spread. Now more radio hub-related items coming up, but before let me tell you about the possibility of seeing one of my favorite home-built receivers. You can send your request for the homebrew receiver file to info.rhc@enet.cu. Again, info.rhc@enet.cu. Remember to include in the subject line home-built receivers file. And here is now, at the end of the show, more information about solar activity. Tuesday UTC Day Update. I had the early morning Havana time, 12 hours UTC, solar flux 73 units, the planetary A index 13, and the K index at 12 hours UTC was just 1. Also very interesting fact was that the solar flux will continue to be at very low levels, around 73 to 75 units for the next 3, possibly also to 5 days. The number of sunspots, the NOAA sunspot number, was at 15, and on Monday it was 22. So possibly during the next few days we will see another period of 0 sunspots in sight. Send your signal reports and comments to info@rhc@dnet.cu or via airmail to Arnie Coro, Radio Havana Cuba, Havana, Cuba.
And that's all for today. This is Arnie Coro, Radio Amateur CO2KK, your host here at Radio Havana's DXers Unlimited, saying 73 and very good DX.
Thanks, Arnie. Arnie Coro, a regular Tuesday program, DXers Unlimited, heard also on Sundays on RHC.